who would have investigated it. Well, there have to be duplicate records in other locations. And it is true that 60 to 80 bookkeepers and personnel in accounting died on 9/11 as a result of that attack on the Pentagon. But it's looking more and more and smelling more and more like the military was covering up where that money went, and we know they just love black operations. So that money, the military knows exactly where the money is. They just don't want us to know where they put it.
Right, and the person in charge of the Pentagon money at the time was the Rabbi Dov Zakheim?
Yes, which ties it to the Mossad in Israel.
Yes, and then he apparently ran out of the country.
That's right.
Right after.
That's right. So the Pentagon was attacked by the DOD with a cruise missile. The target, the building target, went right through naval intelligence. They love to use anniversaries and ironies and numerology and symbology, and so there are other reasons to know or understand that the Navy was involved. Another thing the Navy has done, which I've noticed all through my investigations of depleted uranium and radiation going back to the Manhattan Project, is that the Navy has the most advanced intelligence in the world. They are much quieter than the other branches of the military. They are using the Air Force as a cover for their control and operations in space. Not very many people know the Navy exploded 3 nuclear weapons in space in the Van Allen belts. So they have been very involved in studying space and in the weaponization of space. We have to remember that. That's essential. Now, going to where else it was carried out, the attack on the Pentagon absolutely condemns the Department of Defense as being the major actor in 9/11 in implementing and carrying it out for the oligarchs and the politicians. The World Trade Center was a target. The day before, on September 10th, the day before 9/11, FEMA announced there would be 3 terrorist events in the United States. There would be a terrorist event in New York City. It happened the very next day. There would be a hurricane disaster in New Orleans, and we know that HAARP was involved in that. And that happened about 3 years later. And there would be an earthquake disaster on the west coast of the United States. And guess what, Sophia? They're having major earthquake drills in California right now.
Mm-hmm.
So, so who benefited from the attack on the World Trade Center? Why was that a target? Number one, those 2 buildings, the 2 towers for the World Trade Center, symbolized the world dominance and the global dominance and the prestige of the United States globally. And by symbolically destroying that, it was a psychic trauma to the global population and to the American population, and sort of a prediction of, in a way, the fall of the United States, which is happening right now. Now, that's a global picture. In a more local picture, the property owners in the Tribeca area, which was near the World Trade Center, were upset because they had over 50% non-occupancy of commercial real estate, which they owned. And so they viewed the World Trade Center, which was owned by the New York Port Authority, as a very serious and unwelcome competitor. And by taking those two towers down, these property owners suddenly had the benefit of being able to offer office space to all the displaced companies and corporations that were occupying the two World Trade Center buildings. So the local property owners benefited tremendously from the destruction of the World Trade Center buildings. They were also old, and I guess that the demolition or taking down the buildings would have been very costly, and they had been bought by Larry Silverstein just before 9/11 and highly insured, and fires and real estate disasters are a very, very favorite scam of Zionist Jews and people tied to Israel.
In fact, the towers were leased, but he was the lowest bidder for that particular lease out of many bidders in New York, Larry Silverstein. And
he was the lowest bidder?
Yes.
What does that mean?
That means it was put up for bidding, the lease to the World Trade Center complex. He was the lowest bidder, yet
and he still
got it.
He still got it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's an inside job. So it's another false flag indicator. Now, another indicator of who was behind it and the length of time it took to plan this, it took over 30 years to plan 9/11 because they had to just move all their key people into strategic positions throughout the government. Christy Todd Whitman was the head of the EPA. She did the cover-up on the air quality and the health hazards and environmental hazards as a result of the attack on the WTC. And Christy Todd Whitman is a Rockefeller agent.
And how do you know that?
Oh, I did research on it.
Mm-hmm.
She's been streamlined through his organizations and hired by him and for decades. And also, she and her husband financially benefited from the disaster at the WTC. They made money on it through their investments, and her husband worked for the insurance company that held the insurance portfolio on the WTC buildings. So they had a lot of ties to it. And her job was to protect the property owners in the Tribeca area and other parts of New York City to keep in order to not let out the real health hazards of the destruction of the World Trade Centers to potential renters and residents of property they owned already. Now, there's a really funny quote, and I'll have to find it on my computer and then read it. I can't find it right now. But Al Franken stated in his book that, yes, he got the Jew call. I forgot which mayor called him, but this was just before 9/11, and he was warned not to be in the World Trade Center buildings where he had an office on 9/11. Condoleezza Rice called Willie Brown, who was mayor of San Francisco, and warned him days before 9/11 not to fly on that day. And also the U.S. attorney, what's his name, the real Christian guy in the Department of Justice. I can't remember his name. Anyway, he was also warned not to fly on 9/11. And then we have...
So you're including those warnings with the warnings that people got because they were Jewish not to work at the World Trade Center?
It's really because they were Zionists.
Yes.
The Zionist Jews were notified, but also other Zionists were notified. Who was the U.S. Attorney General? He was the real Christian guy who he had to cover the bare breasts of Justice, the statue of Justice, the woman holding the scales in the Department of Justice.
I can Google it.
Everybody knows his name. I'll think of it.
Okay.
And then also, all of the art was removed from the World Trade Center buildings a month or two before 9/11. And I found out that in Japan, they told me that the art belonged to Jewish art gallery dealers.
John Ashcroft.
Ashcroft, yes, it was Ashcroft who was warned. Now, he's a Zionist Christian. It was the Zionists, as General Leibashov says, who were involved. But the Zionist Jews had strong ties to Israel. So this, again, suggests the Mossad was involved. And then, of course, the dancing Israelis were arrested, and they were Mossad agents. Now, Shanksville.
Wait, you skipped one thing on your outline. WTC art removed?
That's what I just was talking about. All of the art was removed from the World Trade Center buildings several months before 9/11. I just discussed that.
I see. I'm sorry. Okay.
Now we'll go to Shanksville, and what happened there, it was real simple. There was a missile shot down, and Major Doug Rocky told me it was by a National Guard pilot.
All right, well, we're coming up on our next break, so we will be back in a couple of minutes. You're listening to Expansion on republicbroadcasting.org, the RBN network. This is Sophia, your host, and my guests today are Alfred Weber and Leuren Moret, and we are going through an overview of the core points of 9/11 with Leuren. That's how we're starting out the show. Now, Leuren, you had just mentioned Shanksville.
Right. Now, a South Dakota National Guard pilot shot that missile down in Shanksville. And this is information from Doug Rocky, who knows the commander personally of that National Guard unit. Also, in the path that cruise missile took that day, and it was headed for Washington, D.C., probably Congress, air traffic controllers were not on duty that day in the path of that cruise missile. There was a skeleton crew.
Okay, so the plane, which was Flight 93, that we heard about, with the the passengers putting off the hijackers and then the plane going down. Are you saying that plane was shot down, or that a missile...
there was no plane.
There was no plane in Shanksville at all? It never even went there?
No, there was nothing there. And I will read from a quote by the first people at the site. Let me just find the quote. Hold on. This is by a local teacher, Susan McElwain, who reported seeing a warthog and described how it went right over her head, 40 to 50 feet above the minivan she was driving. And she had to duck because it seemed so low. She said, "The FBI came and talked to me and said there was no plane around. Then FBI agents changed their story and tried to say it was a plane taking pictures of the crash 3,000 feet up. But I saw it, and it was there before the crash, and it was 40 feet above my head. They did not want my story. Nobody here did." So she observed it, and there was, let's see, it was definitely a warthog that shot it down.
So a warthog, what is that, a form of